Controlling space between you and your opponent is really important in martial arts, including boxing. The kind of moves you make, like jabs or hooks and uppercuts, mostly depends on how far you are from your opponent. So, thinking about this space is key when planning your tactics. In music, when different tunes mix together to make a sound, it's called a chord. Harmony is a big part of music theory. There's this idea called functional harmony theory that sorts harmony based on what role it plays in a piece of music. Harmony functions are divided into 3 categories. Tonic, the most stable and fundamental. Subdominant, slightly unstable. Dominant, the most unstable. Usually, in music, chord progressions begin with the stable tonic, shift to the less stable subdominant, and then to the really unstable dominant. Going back to the tonic makes the listeners feel at ease. This shows the idea in functional harmony theory that music swings between being steady and unsteady. If music is about going back and forth between stability and instability, then boxing can be interpreted as a sport that goes back and forth between safe and unsafe. In other words, you start from a far distance, observe your opponent, and then step in when you see an opportunity to move into an intermediate distance where you can be attacked with a variety of punches. If your opponent collapses, you can engage them in close combat, which is challenging to both people. In fact, there isn't any boxer who doesn't think about distance. And if you observe their vocabulary, the words about distance are categorized into 3 groups. Far distance, long range. Intermediate distance, middle range. Close distance, short range. In this way, the concept of functional harmony in music theory and the concept of distance in boxing share a common characteristic of going back and forth between 3 states. Therefore, I hypothesize that the symbols and classifications of functional harmony may be useful in understanding distance in boxing. In other words, the long range in boxing can be called tonic distance. The so-called middle range can be called subdominant distance, and the close range can be called dominant distance. A summary of each distance is as follows. Tonic distance. A straight punch can reach far with a step forward, but even without stepping, just a jab can make the opponent feel threatened. Subdominant distance. You can throw straight punches without moving forward, and the same goes for long hooks and uppercuts. No need to step forward. Dominant distance. This is the range where you can land short hooks and uppercuts without having to step towards your opponent.
It might seem a bit odd or even unnecessary to use names from music theory for something like long range. But if we don't use terms that aren't about the actual length of the distance, like long or short, it can cause confusion later. For instance, combinations used at a long distance can be called tonic combinations. If we just called these long combinations, it could get mixed up with a combination that has many punches, which wouldn't be very clear.
When performing a movement at tonic distance, put T at the beginning of the note, S for subdominant distance, and D for dominant distance. This clarifies the specific distance at which the movements on the sheet boxing are being performed.
If we don't give a name to different distances, we might make a mistake by not paying attention to how far we are from our opponent. Think about weaving, for example. It's a way to dodge hooks and works best when you are at either subdominant or dominant distance from your opponent. But when I just concentrate on practicing weaving, I sometimes end up doing it at a tonic distance. From my opponent's point of view, it's not really a useful move, and it leaves me open to attacks as I finish the weave. This was a common mistake I made when I first started boxing. So for beginners, these distance symbols are really important. They help you always be aware of how far you are from your opponent while you're learning new moves.